Good afternoon. Welcome to today's hearing of the Community Development and Regulatory Services. For today, October 10th, we are currently waiting on quorum, and as soon as a quorum of the committee arrives, we will begin, but I wanted everyone to know why we hadn't started yet. So I want to thank you for being here today. I'll also note that the order of the agenda is going to be the presentation by staff on grants, followed by a motion on the consent agenda, and then the public hearings. So there will be one item prior to the public hearing agenda. I just want folks to know that. I've been joined by council members Quincy, Reich, and Warsami, which is a quorum of the committee. So we will go ahead and begin the agenda. I'll start with item number 7, which is our quasi-judicial public hearing that we are now going to delete from the agenda. Are there any questions with regard to item number 7, delete from the agenda? Seeing none on the motion to delete, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved. And then we will also take items 10, 11, 12. I'll note that on item number 10, item 41 on page 9, Sally's Saloon, is being postponed. So I will move the liquor business and gambling licenses except for item 41 on page 9, which we will postpone one cycle. On the motion to approve item 10 as amendment, as well as items 11 and 12, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those items are approved. Then we'll move on to item number 9 and ask Mr. Carroll to give his presentation. I note there are 2 items we will be amending on that as well. Mr. Carroll, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Committee. As you know, I appear before you twice a year with a list of projects that City staff are recommending for Brownfield grant applications. Thank you, Councilmember Goodman, for outlining a couple of topics you'd like me to address very briefly. I'll go through those in order. You asked for a brief overview of the programs. Many, if not most, development and redevelopment sites in Minneapolis are contaminated in one way or another, either because of a past industrial legacy or because they were constructed at a time when people didn't understand as much about asbestos and lead-based paint and that type of thing. Fortunately, we have 3 local grantors that provide brownfield grant funding for Minneapolis projects. The state of Minnesota, through its Department of Employment and Economic Development, or DEED, the Metropolitan Council, and Hennepin County all have brownfield grant programs. A number of years ago, they coordinated their programs so they all have the same application deadlines, twice a year, May 1, November 1. We solicited pre-applications back in August of this year. The city's pre-application deadline for the fall brownfield grant round was September 5. We received a number of applications and reviewed them. The staff report lists those projects that we are now recommending. That's an overview of the programs. You also asked me to address whether or not the applicants are ranked. This is a little bit confusing because some of the grantors have grant programs where they ask the city to rank the applications, and in fact, they sometimes have limitations on the number of applications we can submit in any given grant round. The brownfield system is different than that. There's no limit on the number of applications we can submit, and the grantors ask us to not rank the projects. They can't prohibit us from doing that, but they said if we do it, they don't pay any attention to it at all. The reason for that is they have their own ranking criteria, and they say, in a way, we almost don't care how you rank them. We're going to score them and rank them ourselves. All they want to know is whether the city of Minneapolis supports a given project for purposes of getting grant funding. It's kind of a toggle switch, yes or no type thing. They want a resolution from us that lists those projects that we've approved for purposes of seeking grant funding. So that's why we write the staff report. That's why we appear here. You asked about how much funding is available and how much we are asking for. I'm going to make some recommendations here at the end about some modifications to my staff report and the resolutions, and taking those requests and changes into effect. What we have here is a case where DEED has about $4 million worth of grant funding available in this round. We've gotten pre-applications from Minneapolis projects seeking a total of about $3.4 million. The Metropolitan Council has about $2.5 million available. We've received pre-applications for Minneapolis projects of about $3 million. The Hennepin County is now alternating. They're involved in only one round per year. They weren't involved in the spring round this year. They will be involved in the fall round. They've said that they have about $1.3 million available, and we have pre-application requests of about $2.6 million. That naturally leads to the question as to why we would submit applications that seek more money that's available. There's basically 3 reasons for that. Number 1 is that based on the demand, on occasion, grantors put more money into the programs than they had originally anticipated. Often that's in a response to the applications they get from Minneapolis. This happened just in the last round. Ordinarily, the ceiling on how much funding we could have gotten from the Met Council in the last round was about $1.1 million. The Met Council transferred funds into their TBRA program from other undersubscribed rounds, and we ended up getting over almost $2.2 million in grant funding. Another reason we submit lots of applications is that the grantors like that. They have to seek funding for their programs and refunding from time to time. When they can prove that the programs are oversubscribed, it preserves their ability to continue to get funding and hopefully get more funding in the future. Another reason is because, we're at a point now in, early October where things change with projects, and sometimes projects drop out of the mix. There's less competition. So submitting everything that we think is eligible is a good way to preserve the maximum amount of grant funding. The timeline for the decision making, we as staff will continue to review the applications from now through November 1. In almost all these cases, applications are submitted by the city on behalf of the projects. The grantors will take the period from November 1 until late December to review them, rank them, score them. They will then issue staff reports or get final decisions made. We will know who's going to get money and who's not, probably in the late December to late January range. And in most cases, those funds are available immediately for projects that want to start their investigations or remediations right away. You asked about our success in securing grants in the past several rounds. I'll give you two examples. In the spring round, we were successful in getting grant funding for 12 out of the 15 Minneapolis projects that sought funding. We got about $4.9 million in total. The next closest city, we got 14 of the 22 grants that the grantors awarded. The next closest city got 2. In the round before that, 12 out of the 14 Minneapolis projects that were seeking funding were successful in getting some or all of their funding. So we got 12 grants, 12 projects were awarded grants, a total of 17 individual grants out of the 35 that the 3 grantors awarded. Over the last 10 years, we have typically averaged about 25% of the deed funding that's been awarded, about a third of the Met Council funding, and we've gotten about a half of the Hennepin County funding. I started doing this for the city in 2007. From 2007 through the spring round of this year, we successfully submitted 361 applications that got funding for Minneapolis projects. The total grant funding amount is about $85 million. You also asked about other information that might be useful. I will point out that there's a section that we added to this staff report that has not been in prior reports. It has to do with project readiness. All of the grantors are getting increasingly concerned about circumstances under which they've awarded money to projects in Minneapolis and elsewhere that have not moved forward. So they've asked us to sort of ramp up our review of projects. Frankly, a lot of these projects have to submit pre-applications to us while projects are still in the formative stages. And things change on a day-to-day basis with some of these projects. So we included a line in the staff report that says, city staff will continue to monitor the progress of the projects referred to herein during September and October. Applications for any given project will not be submitted by the city on November 1 if, in the opinion of city staff, that project will not be able to meet the grantor's project readiness expectations as of the November 1 application deadline. We basically are hoping that you give us the discretion to not submit to the grantors applications that have a low probability of being awarded. And that's because projects do change pretty much on a day-to-day basis. I think that addressed most of the questions that you raised. The projects that we're submitting to you, in many cases, don't have all of their ducks in a row. In some cases, they haven't finalized their financing. They've made preliminary presentations to neighborhood groups, but we try to review them and figure out if there's some type of fatal flaw in the project. These look reasonably ready at this stage, and I think we make mistakes from time to time in assessing project readiness, but I think our track record suggests that generally we do a pretty good job in picking projects that are going to have legs and are going to succeed.
Thank you very much for your report, Mr. Carroll. Is there anyone who has any questions for staff with regard to the presentation?
So the changes I was going to suggest or request, there was one project that we had discussions with up through and including yesterday about project readiness. And that project has opted to withdraw its pre-applications. And for that reason, we would like to modify the deed, Met Council, and TBRA applications to remove references to the
Curry and Irving.
Right, Curry and Irving project. Also, it was brought to our attention that one of the projects, the Sons of Norway, had intended to seek funding from the Met Council's TBRA program. That was inadvertently omitted from the staff report and from that resolution. So we would like to add the Sons of Norway project to the TBRA resolution that's in your packet. And I'll work with the clerk's office to get whatever additional documents are needed process that.
Great. Seeing no further questions for Mr. Carroll, I'm going to move items 9, 1, 2, and 3 forward for approval, noting the 2 amendments to remove references to the project called Curry and Irving and to add the Sons of Norway project to 9.3.
Is that the TVRA resolution? Met Council TVRA?
9.2.
2, yes.
Further comments or questions on the chair's motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those items are approved. Thank you very much for your report.
Thank you.
We'll then move to our public hearing agenda, starting with item number 1, which is a land sale. Mr. Ramadan, welcome.
Madam Chair, members of the council or the committee, our first item is the sale of 701 Newton Avenue North through the Minneapolis Homes Program. As you know, the policies of the program were established by the City Council on December 11, 2015. 701 Newton was acquired on October 23, 2015 from Hennepin County as tax forfeited land for its appraised value of $2,000. Previously, 701 Newton was sold to Auspicious Living LLC, but they failed to close. The staff remarketed the property and reviewed 6 applications in accordance with the manual and recommends the sale of 701 Newton Avenue North to Lali Sashianara and Sandeep Kumar Adusumili for its appraised value of $2,000. The property was constructed in 1940 and is a 1,242 square foot, 1-bedroom, 1-bath, single-family home. Lali and Sandeep intend to rehabilitate the property as a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, single-family home by investing $45,149 to live in as the owner occupants. Lali and Sandeep are recommended as the purchaser because they intend to be owner occupants and have an experienced general contractor who has completed a number of Minneapolis Homes projects. Although CTW Group and Quain Investments scored higher, they were not recommended as both have several projects underway through Minneapolis Homes, and there's some concern about capacity. The Northside Residents Redevelopment Council received notification on May 10, 2017. They recommended another applicant, Sharmark Issa, but staff believes that his rehab estimates do not meet the minimum rehabilitation requirement standards of the program. I have with us today Lali Inara and her builder, Ram Construction, are here with us today if you have any questions of me or of them.
Are there any questions for Mr. Ramadan on item number 1? Seeing none, thank you for your report. We'll open the public hearing on item number 1, which is a land sale at 701 Newton Avenue North. Is there anyone here to speak to this issue? Please step forward, state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Lali Anara. I currently live at 309 West 7th Street, Madison, Minnesota, 56256. I am very happy to be the soon purchaser of 701 Newton Avenue North. I'm happy to be here, happy to get the process started and move in.
Well, thank you for being here today.
Your time.
Good luck to you.
Thank you all.
Is there anyone else here to speak to this issue? Anyone? Anyone? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I always love when the applicant comes to talk, and so I happily move approval of this item.
Item number 1 has been moved for approval. Further comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved. We'll move on to item number 2. Mr. Ramadan.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, 1610 Oak Park Avenue North. Again, through the sale of Minneapolis Homes, the staff recommends 1610 Oak Park Avenue to be sold to Alicia Rose Steele for its appraised value of $5,100 subject to conditions. Additionally, we recommend awarding up to $20,000 to Alicia Steele for the Minneapolis Homes Home Buyer Incentive Funds. 1610 Oak Park Avenue North was acquired on January 16, 2009 from the Bank of New York Trust for $1. Staff has continuously marketed this property to a listserv of now over 1,700 people, and this is the only application received for this property. The lot size is 44 feet by 136, or approximately 5,984 square feet. The purchaser intends to invest $195,000 to build a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, single-family home and to live in as the owner-occupant. The purchaser has also secured the services of an experienced, city-certified, small, underutilized business program minority contractor, Envirotech Construction. CPED's construction management staff reviewed the scope of work and estimates submitted by the applicant's builder and confirmed they are sufficient to meet the minimum building standards of the program. We'd also like to note that this is only the second home buyer incentive that we're awarding, and we do expect to have at least one more before the end of this year. We also noted that the Northside Residents Redevelopment Council received notification on June 21st, 2017. Alicia Steele is actually here with us today as well, and if there are any questions of me or of her.
Are there any questions for Mr. Ramadan on item number 2? Seeing none, thank you for your report. We'll open the public hearing on item number 2, which is a land sale at 1610 Oak Park Avenue North. Is there anyone here to speak to this issue? Come on up, state your name and address for the record.
Hello, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Alicia Rose Steele, and I'm elated. I mean, I have way more to say than what I can say today, but this is a huge experience for myself and my future family, so thank you so much.
Well, it's wonderful that you're here today, and congratulations to you. And I'm sure within one moment you will be the proud owner of 1610 Oak Park Avenue. And thank you for your commitment to the
Thank
city.
you so much.
Is there anyone else here to speak to this issue? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Madam Chair, once again. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your investment in the community, and we look forward to having you as a new homeowner. I move approval.
On Councilmember Fry's motion to approve, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved. We'll move on then to item number 3. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have an application before us for an on-sale wine with strong beer license, Class E, by Sovereign Goods Grocery, LLC, doing business as Carly Coffee. They currently operate with a restaurant and sidewalk cafe, and they're upgrading to wine and strong beer. This location was previously a Dunn Brothers Coffee. It's located in the Carrick neighborhood, Ward 10, at 821 West Lake Street. They have interior seating for 53 persons and an exterior sidewalk cafe with seating for 8. Sovereign Goods Grocery, LLC is a registered Minnesota corporation and is owned by Christine Gremmels. This application does require a public hearing, and we notified all residents and property owners within 600 feet of the premises of today's public hearing. We also notified the Carrick and Lowry Hill East Neighborhood Associations and the Lake Street Council. We received 3 responses from our notifications of today's public hearing, and all were in favor of this application. Staff finds they meet all of our requirements, and staff's recommendation is that the application be approved.
Okay. We're going to pay attention first to the hearing, and then we'll get the timer going. So this is a new business license for Carly Coffee in the 10th Ward. This is a public hearing on item number 3. Is there anyone here to speak to this issue? Anyone? Come on up. Just a little commercial about your business would be great. Wait till you come up to the mic.
My name is Christine Gremmels. My husband Håkan Sazer and I have owned Sovereign Grounds coffee shop on 48th in Chicago for over 20 years. And we bought this space from Mike Carley July 1st and have hugely expanded the food menu. And Uptown enjoys the food, but the coffee not so much in the evening. They would prefer other things to drink. So
you're going to sell other things?
Huh?
You're going to sell other things?
Oh, I tons of salad, tons of food. Can't hardly keep up with it, but just wanted to add that to the options.
Great. Well, thank you for being here today. Is there anyone else to speak to this issue? Anyone? Anyone? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Councilmember Quincy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a real privilege because we've known, obviously, the folks at Sovereign Grounds and Akan and Chris for a long time, and I know they'll be a terrific property owners and business operators and a great contribution to the Uptown neighborhood. So I'd like to move approval of this item.
Approval of item number 3 has been moved. Further comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved. On to item number 4, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have an application by Porto Veracruzano 2, LLC, doing business as Porto Veracruzano 2, at 331 East Lake Street. They currently operate a restaurant there with a on-sale wine and strong beer license Class E, and they would like to upgrade to full on-sale liquor with Sunday sales Class E. They have operated at this location since December of 2016. It's in the central neighborhood in the 9th Ward. They have interior customer seating for 72 persons and no exterior seating at this time. They're open from 11 to 10 p.m. Monday through Thursday and 11 a.m. to 2 a.m. Friday through Sunday. They provide food service during all hours of operation. Porto Veracruzano 2 is a Minnesota corporation formed on October 3rd, 2016. The principal owners are Marco Mendez Bravo and Jose Carrasco. This upgrade requires a public hearing. We notified all persons within 600 feet of this premises. We also notified the Central Area Neighborhood Development Organization and the Lake Street Council. We received 3 responses from our notification of today's public hearing. 1 was in favor of the application and 2 were opposed. The 2 that were opposed to the application indicated that this restaurant was already selling alcohol, distilled spirits without the correct license, and that they were open late at night into the early morning and were a nuisance. We reviewed all of the police calls for service and police reports for this address for the past couple of years and found no police activity at this site at all. The business licensing department has not received any complaints of this reported activity. And we also conducted an unannounced inspection this week and found no evidence of alcohol violations at all. Upon complete review of this application and what we hear at today's public hearing, staff is recommending that this application for upgrade to on-sale liquor be approved.
Are there any questions for Mr. Wilson on item number 4? Seeing none, thank you for your report. We'll open the public hearing on item number 4, which is a license upgrade for Puerto Veracruzano. Is there anyone here to speak to this issue? Please step forward, state your name and address for the record.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Marco Mendez. I'm the owner from the Porto Veracruzano, and I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to make my business and growing up. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here today. Is there anyone else here to speak to this issue? Anyone? Anyone? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Councilmember Cano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to move this item forward.
This item has been moved for approval. Further comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved. Our remaining agenda is dealing with short-term rental hosting platforms, both the ordinance as well as, well, the short-term rental hosting platforms, both ends of the regulation. So we'll take both items as one for the staff report. With regard to the timer, can I see a show of hands of how many people would like to speak today? Okay, so we're going to try to get the timer set up while the staff report is going on so that everyone will get 2 minutes to speak, and you'll know how it works based on the timer, and we'll figure that out while the staff is giving their report. I'll note for the public hearing, we really want your comments. Questions will not be answered by the panel since we're learning about it too. So hopefully Mr. Stockman will answer any questions that anyone might have. Mr. Stockman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Committee members, Noah Schuckman, Director of Regulatory Services. I have a brief presentation on item number 5 and 6, which are 2 separate ordinance changes on the same subject matter, which is short-term rentals. Both Grant Wilson from CPED Business Licensing and Joel Fussy from the City Attorney's Office will hopefully chime in as appropriate, and Grant will share a portion of the presentation as well. This ordinance change comes forward as a result of a staff direction in September of 2016 from Councilmember Fry, directing the coordinator's office to convene a work group to examine the industry. And so the work group met from fall of last year until May of this year, and included a list of staff from Intergovernmental Relations, the Coordinator's Office, Regulatory Services, CPED, the Health Department, the City Attorney's Office, Finance, and then Meet Minneapolis. And during that time, we also met with external stakeholders, including the lodging industry, and then as well as interacting with the industry itself, Airbnb, Expedia, and other partners. I want to just take a moment to acknowledge that Nuria Rivera-Vandermeide from the City Coordinator's Office and Sasha Bergman from IGR took the lead on starting the work group and put that process together and carried us through as we move forward before the staff group here between my office, Kim Keller, and Christina Dowling, and then Grant Wilson and Joel Fussy moved forward with the actual ordinance language and getting us to today. As the work group met, we looked into financial and tax implications, looked at other city ordinances around the state and around the country, the city's housing and rental markets, and then, as I mentioned, took input from stakeholder groups. Through the work, we defined a short-term rental as rental of a dwelling unit for a period of less than 30 consecutive days for tourist or transient use. To just show a slide that summarizes other jurisdictions, the policies in other jurisdictions vary depending on what each local government unit wants to do. Bloomington, Minnesota, for example, completely prohibits short-term rentals, while our neighbors in St. Paul are voting tomorrow to adopt their ordinance. And as you can see as you look through, there are ordinances around the region and the country that vary based on the local municipality. Duluth, Minnesota, for instance, has a maximum of 60 permits allowed for ongoing short-term rental use, and then they legislate differently for people who are in their home and having a room rented out.
Mr. Stockman, I guess we're going to take questions during your report. Councilmember Frye.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Stockman, you just glossed over an important fact that I just wanted you to highlight a little bit more. It sounded like you were saying that if you are presently occupying a room or the vast majority of a home in which you own, it goes through a different criteria if one of the rooms are going to be rented out on a short-term basis?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Frye, I was giving the example of Duluth, Minnesota, which has two separate categories.
Okay, so you're still giving examples of other locations.
Yes.
Okay, my apologies. Keep going.
Thank you. So currently, short-term rentals are not explicitly regulated in Minneapolis. As a result, there are a couple of implications. One is that we have, as a city, no ability to get into properties where we have life safety or inspection-related concerns. We have no real concept of what the scope of the industry is in the city. There's not a way for the city to understand the universe of properties being rented in this manner. And we're also not collecting tax revenue associated with short-term rentals. Our current estimate is that there are approximately 1,600 properties available for short-term rental in the city, and we do expect substantial increases as we have major events come to the city, like the Super Bowl, the X Games, and the NCAA Final Four.
Mr. Stockman, Councilmember Frye has a question.
Sorry, I have another one. So you mentioned kind of industry impact and the necessity to have some form of safeguards in there. And if it's all right, I just have a question for Mr. Fussy on this topic. Mr. Fussy, it's my understanding that one of the issues was that there was some legal difficulty in that hotels presently pay a tax. Hotels do have some form of regulation surrounding them, yet the short-term rentals did not, and there was a risk of lawsuit.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Frye, certainly that's true. A host of issues were looked at and examined, and in reaching out to all of the interested parties, a number of potential disparities were looked at, and certainly it was the desire of everyone to make sure that people are operating on the most fair field, and I think legal challenges were certainly part of that, and have been a part of this throughout the process, but we've endeavored to take an approach that we think comports with the existing laws and regulations, and which treats everyone in a manner that allows for our best sort of regulation.
Thank you.
So staff has drafted with the Attorney's Office 2 ordinances, one specific to the platforms themselves, so that specifically regulates each of the platforms that assist property owners in offering a short-term rental, and then one specific to the hosts. CPED business licensing would be responsible for the ordinance associated with the platforms, and regulatory services, my staff, would be responsible for the ordinances associated with the hosts, and we would work together to do that. I will turn over to Grant Wilson for a summary of the business licensing portion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. Chapter 351 ordinance amendment proposal before you today is a new chapter, and it will for the first time license short-term rental hosting platforms. We felt it necessary to do that because it will identify the true owners and operators of each hosting platform. We actually found up to 16 such companies listing properties in Minneapolis right now. It will ensure that the hosting platforms remain law-abiding. They will provide a communication outlet between us and the host property owners. One of the requirements will be that the hosting platforms may not list non-compliant properties, so some property that may have lost their rental dwelling license or their short-term rental registration. It also has a provision for the hosting platforms to accurately collect taxes. The license fee recommended for the hosting platforms is brought to you today at a level of $5,000 annually per hosting platforms. That was based upon a review of staff cost recovery. We anticipate staff will spend about 40 hours per rental hosting platform annually. That will comprise about $2,500 of the fee. The other $2,500 will be used to pay a third-party data collection service that will give us information that we need on how many platforms and rental dwelling units are operating in the city. This ordinance proposal requires a public hearing, which we'll have here in a minute. But to notice that, we notified all short-term rental hosting platforms that we could find. We notified all business associations and neighborhood associations of today's public hearing. We received 2 responses. One was in support and one was opposed with a suggestion that we not allow backyard fire pits in residential short-term rentals because they're problematic to the neighborhood. That said, I'll stand for any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Wilson on the Chapter 351 proposal? This is to license the platforms themselves, VRBO, Airbnb, et cetera, not the individual people, the platforms. I want to make sure no one on the committee, everyone understands that. Okay. All right, we'll move on to the next part.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In Chapter 244, which is the portion that would be an inclusion in the current rental licensing code, the city currently has 25,000 licensed rental properties. That encompasses approximately 100,000 licensed rental units in the city. What this ordinance amendment would do would be to add to that portfolio the short-term rental version. What we do not know currently is how many currently licensed rental properties are being used for this purpose, but this would bring 2 more categories into rental licensing. So you'll see on the graphic in front of you that on the left, you'll see a non-owner occupied home that is being rented out for short-term use. In this case, the entire unit is rented out. The owner is not present and does not live in the unit. And that would be consistent with our current rental pool, that it's an investment property. The middle category, owner occupied, would be where the owners would depart from the unit while the period of rental is happening and then return afterwards. And those 2 categories would be required to get a license through the city of Minneapolis to do short-term rental. The final category on your right is an owner-occupied property where they're renting out space in the home while they are there. And so a bedroom, a basement that they're allowing for rental. And we're not requiring in the proposed ordinance for property owners to get a rental license for that use. To take a look at the financial impacts of the proposal, the estimated sales and entertainment tax associated with the industry is $700,000. As Mr. Wilson mentioned, it's a $5,000 per platform fee that's associated with the ordinance. And then the license fee for each host in the 2 categories that I mentioned would be a $46 annual fee that would give the city information on the property owner and the property itself and provide for us to include them in our normal rental inspection cycle and also give the city an opportunity to do an inspection on a complaint basis or as needed. We do anticipate on a one-time basis the need in 2018 for staff to process applications and staff to also manage research and inspections of initial properties as it comes in. We don't know yet what the full burden of that will be, and so we will reassess at the time of the 2019 budget proposals and adoption for future years, but that would be our estimated staff needs for 2018. Next steps. Were we to continue on schedule here in committee today, the passage would be scheduled for October 20th, and we would look to begin accepting applications for short-term rental licenses on December 1st. The city has, working with our communications department, put together a communications plan for reaching out to both the news media and current property owners about the change. We would add additional information to our rental property owners workshop about short-term rentals, and pursuant to Chapter 351 in the ordinance amendment that is as written, we would ask the platforms to help us to communicate with their licensees about who would need to get a rental license for this purpose. And then we would also work with the Super Bowl host committee to help publicize it as well, given the likely increase around the Super Bowl. With that, I'm happy to stand for questions, as are Mr. Wilson and Mr. Fussy.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I understand this, and I repeat it out loud in kind of non-regulatory terms. So I own a house. I have 3 bedrooms. I sleep in one. I rent 1 or 2, but I live there. Will I be regulated or have to pay any fees? Yes or no?
Madam
Not
Chair.
just yes or no.
No.
I own a house. I have 3 bedrooms. I usually sleep in one, but I want to rent the whole house and go stay with my boyfriend. If I had one, that'd be great. But if I didn't, I have to go stay with someone else. Then I'm going to rent my house, but the whole house I'm going to stay somewhere else. Do I have to be registered?
Yes, Madam Chair.
And how much will that cost me?
$46
I have a second home.
One time.
per year.
I have a second home. I don't, but if I had a second home and I lived in one home and I had this second home and I wanted to use my second home in order to rent for 1 day, 3 days, 5 days, 1 week, under 1 month, what would happen to me?
You'd be required to get a license.
A rental license.
That's correct.
Just like anyone else who rents their second home or their investment property, correct?
That's correct, Madam Chair.
So 3 categories. I live there when they're there. I don't live there when they're there. I never live there and never am going to live there. Those are the categories.
That's correct, Madam
Zero fees, $46 1 time a year, rental license like anyone else who uses rental property.
That's correct, Madam
No restrictions on how many rentals in a neighborhood, how many rentals in a building, or anything like that, right?
Not to my knowledge, Madam Chair.
No other undiscussed things that could come up later.
Well, I will just note that we do have rentals on a tier system, and so were there to be a different tier for one of the properties,
Okay,
then yes, there would be a potential difference in the price of the rental license, but otherwise, no.
great. Okay. Anyone else have any questions? I'm sure you do, since this is kind of complicated. Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So for everyone who's listening, first off, the sharing economy is coming to town in a major way, whether it's in the form of Uber and Lyft and ride sharing, or it's in the form of short-term rentals. And I think it's a very innovative new business type, and it's one that we need to embrace. And as Mr. Fussy pointed out, it's also one that from a legal perspective, we do have to have some form of safety guidelines and mechanisms. And that's exactly what we're doing today. Speaking only for myself, I'm very much for this new business model. I think when you have a cornucopia of different stay options in a city, whether it's hotel, motel, bed and breakfast, European style inn, or Airbnb or VRBO, I think this just adds to the number of options that you can choose, and it makes your stay in a city better. So we're all for this. We need to figure out how to do this right. And obviously, there's a lot of technical logistics that we're sorting through right now. So we recently got a letter that was addressed to Chairperson Goodman a little bit ago that identified a couple of areas of the ordinance that were of concern, at the very least, to Airbnb. And I just want to go through a couple of those to make sure that for everybody's purposes, they understand what is and is not on the table. Mr. Stockman, the first segment of this letter talked about MCO 244, which is allowing short-term rental operators to comply with new regulations. And the concern was that short-term rental operators, so in other words, those renting out their home, the concern was that they weren't able to advertise their listings as they completed the new registration process. So, right now we've got the Super Bowl coming to town. People are obviously advertising their listings and their homes for the upcoming Super Bowl, and the concern was that they wouldn't be able to do that. My understanding is that with there's no ambiguity, they absolutely can advertise their homes as they're working through the registration process. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Fry, that is correct. Our intent is to make this as simple and clean as possible, and so we have no intention of getting in the middle of that. Our goal is to help educate property owners as we move forward, and then work with them to make sure that they're getting their properties registered as the process continues.
So I just want to take that item off the docket. Anyone who is advertising for the Super Bowl, we want you to advertise for the Super Bowl. We recognize that you're booking your place in sometimes 6 months, a year, 2 years in advance. There is no restriction at all on that in this ordinance, and so that is not a legitimate concern. The next one is MCO 351, and so there were a few forms in here, and this really has nothing to do with the short-term rental owners. This really has to do more with the platforms, but I want to go through this to be very, very, very specific. One of the first things that Airbnb asked for was for there to be no regular download requirement. In other words, no requirement that the city would be able to download all of the information on a monthly or bi-monthly or annual basis. It is my understanding that has been taken out. There is no download requirement whatsoever. Is that right?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Fry, that is correct. While we would prefer to have a regular download of information from the platforms, they did object to that, and in our multiple conversations with Airbnb and Expedia, and the work that our attorneys did with theirs to find a common ground, we did remove that item from the requirements.
Okay, so Airbnb said they didn't want a regular download requirement, so did VRBO, and we said, okay, no download requirement. Second, there was a concern about sharing of data, so how often the data needed to be shared. They said they didn't want the data to be shared, and we said, okay, we're not going to share the data. Is that right?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Fry, that is correct.
Okay, so no sharing of data, no download requirement. The only data sharing that exists is part of the legal process, which is, in other words, if somebody gets sued and they are by law or by subpoena required to hand over information, we, just like they, legally would have to. Is that right?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Fry, that is correct. I think the other place that there may be a need for the platforms to share under a legal process would be if we, for some reason, as part of our normal process, revoked the rental license associated with the property, short-term or long-term rental, that we would ask the platforms to remove that property from the platform, given that it is no longer legally allowed to be rented in the city.
Right, and that would just be in compliance with everything that we already do, right? So in other words, we're saying that, right now, I mean, put Airbnb, put VRBO aside, put all short-term rentals aside. Right now, when a landlord signs up, they have a registration. They get a license to rent their property out. And if they're messing around, if the property is in unhabitable conditions, and if the license gets taken away, they're no longer able to have a rental property anymore. We don't do this often. This is not like the going rate, but we at the city need to make sure that we don't have slumlords in the city, right? I mean, so that's what we presently do. And all we're saying is the exact same criteria would also apply to everyone else. In other words, if the conditions are horrible, which I'm sure they're not, by the way, but if the conditions are horrible, just like we don't allow a slumlord to exist, we also wouldn't allow a slumlord to exist in the Airbnb context. Is that what you're saying?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Fry, that is correct.
Okay. And so, I mean, these are not new requirements. These are the same exact requirements we've got for literally every single other property in our entire city. And all we're saying is, if a rental license gets taken away, which almost, what's the percentage of the time that happens? Out of the total number of rental licenses in the city, what have we taken away, 1 or 2 in the last several years? A few?
Madam Chair, Councilman Fry, I believe that the number is between 15 and 25 a year at the most. And so that's of 25,000, that makes it 0.1% if I'm doing my
0.1% of the
math
time.
correctly.
Right. Okay. That's really helpful. So I just wanted, before we started the comment, I just wanted to make sure that everybody kind of had an understanding as to where things were. So because a lot of times when these this ordinance process goes through, there's some confusion, and so I just wanted to make sure everybody was on the same page. Madam Chair.
Councilmember Quincy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Shookman, when we were on your earlier slide that had the revenues attached to it, we're talking about the estimated sales and entertainment tax. And as Councilmember Fry was just talking about no sharing of data, I understand that. I understand that would be important. And I don't want to collect data. I certainly don't want to share it. How would we verify sales tax collection?
I would possibly defer to one of my colleagues on the dais, but my understanding is that the state requires the platforms to submit sales tax to the state.
Madam Chair and council members, I know that we have worked closely with staff from the finance department as well, and they've been in touch with the State Department of Revenue, who have become increasingly active in this area recently, and they've, I think, recently released some guidance or some regulations on this topic, and I think there is now mechanisms in place through a conjunction of our regulations and also the State Department of Revenue to assist and ensure that that revenue is collected.
Thank you, Mr. Schuman. I think that was very important. I saw the guidance from the Department of Revenue, and I appreciate them acknowledging that this is under their jurisdiction. These are hotel or short-term rental licenses, will be a state sales tax, and it will be remitted according to their own formulas and processes. But it's the state of Minnesota that will be actually collecting the taxes. Is that fair? And that's why we would not be in the data collection, data downloading kind of position, because it's not our job to audit whether these sales taxes have been collected. Is that a fair assessment?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Quincy, that is my understanding. Yes.
Thank you. Just wanted to be clear on that as well. Thank you, Councilmember.
Are there any further comments or questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, you can take your report down just so it'll clear the screen. If anyone who would like to testify is here, that would be great. I'd ask you to just come up to the microphone. 7 people have signed in advance. And why don't you just go ahead and line up, and we'll have time for everybody. We're going to try to use the 2-minute clock if possible. And we would ask you first to just state for the clerk your name and address for the record. And I want to reiterate, you're going to have 2 minutes.
Are we ready? Well, thank you for letting us have this opportunity to talk about our concerns with the short-term rental regulations. And we appreciate the work that you've done to make this a fair process.
And your name and address for the record.
My name is Ruth Burris, and this is my husband, Frank. We live in Winona, Minnesota, but we own a second home in South Minneapolis. We use it ourselves and rent it out through Airbnb when we can't be there. We're asking that the second home be included in the Tier 2 short-term Airbnb category. In contrast to Airbnb hosts who own and operate several properties or own one and have a second home that they live in, we actually do live in this. We don't live in it all the time, but we are regular occupants of this property. So we feel we should not be included in the non-owner occupied category. It would require changing Tier 2 wording from owner lives at the property to owner lives at the property on a regular basis. Or maybe creating another category if that's necessary for partially owner occupied properties. I would like to make the case that we're not operating this as a business. and shouldn't be subject to the type of regulations that investment properties usually are. This is truly our second home, and we are here quite often. In 2012, we purchased this foreclosed property. It was a mess. We did a lot of work to make it livable, and we had 3 of our sons living in this area, which is the reason we chose to come here. We have done a lot of work through it. We found our kids growing up, and one son moved away, and so we weren't being up here as often as possible, and decided to try Airbnb. My daughter-in-law lives in the area, so she's always available for our guests, and we call this our urban cabin. We have had wonderful experiences with the guests we have. Airbnb has a great review process, so I don't accept people that do not have good reviews. People do not give my property good reviews if it's not what it says it is. So we all look at that and balance that in this particular system.
If you could wrap up, that'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're giving you a little more time because there's 2 of you, but
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, he wasn't going to say anything.
try to wrap up.
Anyway, we do hope that you will consider possibly including us in the second tier because we do occupy the property. We're there.
Thank you so much.
Can I just ask, is your property homesteaded?
We live in Winona. Our homestead
no,
is
it's not.
in Winona. So no, it's not.
No.
But we do pay taxes, and that's part of what Airbnb helps us with.
Good afternoon.
Patrick Porter, 1768 Colfax Avenue South. Madam Chairman and Committee, I run an Airbnb, and I have a license, and I have a 5-star rating, and I probably have had over 600 guests. And like the lady before me said, she isn't in it for business. All my profits, 100% goes to Channel 2, the Minneapolis Art Institute, and the Walker. Do I pay taxes? Airbnb sends me a little love letter that says, just like your W-2 form, we sent this to the state of Minnesota, and we sent this to the federal government. So I am paying taxes. What this does for me, pushing 80 years old, is that I get all these young people in, and I say to them, would you please explain to this old bastard what you do? Because all you kids are in careers that weren't out there when I was there. I also have on my Airbnb situation, all people are welcome. So I get people from Asia, I get the gay crowd, I get Black people, I get white people, and if they're purple, they come through the door too. It has regenerated me personally, pushing 80 years old, rejuvenated me to see all this progression which is going on out there. So all I would like to say is, yes, I have a license. Yes, I pay taxes. And I think the majority of the people that have ever been with Airbnb will say it's a great experience. If you take a tour to Asia, Europe, etc., one of the experiences is that one night or one day in a guest culture, etc.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for being here
Any
today.
questions?
No.
Thank you kindly. Thank you kindly.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Thank you. Go ahead.
No worries. Thank you for the opportunity to address you in the meeting. My name is Scott Owens. One of our addresses is 1174 14th Avenue Southeast. My wife and I got involved in the short-term rental business about 8 years ago. We'd been regular landlords for 12 years before that. There were 3 things that I wanted to mention today. One, I understand the situation because how do you differentiate between roommates and short-term and all the rest? I just have a small concern as somebody who's gone through a whole bunch of rental inspections that, what's happening if there's no inspection and people are staying there. Now, I know that Airbnb has check marks for we've got CO detectors, no alarm, all that. But I do have a concern. I just wanted to mention, I think there might be some way to address that because I'm concerned about the sharing thing. But then again, I'm realistic too. I mean, how do you really do that when you got roommates moving in all the time? Number two, my wife and I have now hosted over 5,000 guest groups. Didn't want to one up them, but we've had a lot. And I can say that from the point of view of taxes, there's sales tax and then the hospitality taxes in Minneapolis. And we have paid every single penny on every single short-term rental over the last few years. And it's not hard to do that. I mean, you have to register with the state, you get a sales tax ID and all the rest of that. But I got the impression some people were thinking no taxes had ever been paid by any of us. I wanted to let you know that's not the case with everybody. Last, and I guess most important from my point of view, my wife and I had properties we converted into short-term and furnished rentals. And over time, we have also rented properties that we then rent short-term after furnishing. And the concept of the platform, we're not actually collecting fees from people, et cetera. I just want to make sure that in the definition of a platform, you're not talking about somebody who just, has an advertising website, which is what we have. I mean, we've got, dozens of properties listed now on our website, but it's all advertising. So I'd hate to, have somebody come to us and we're paying, whatever we have to pay through Airbnb and all the rest, and then somebody says, well, you're supposed to be paying too. So if somebody could pay attention to the definition when you're getting down to the nitty gritty on that, that would be great. But I'm pleased to hear what I've heard so far. It seems to be necessary regulation you're putting in place, and definitely appreciate that part of it.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for being here today. No, we're not going back and forth.
I can't have one more to say. Okay.
No.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lance Bondus. I own a property on 3628 Nicollet Avenue in Minneapolis. I also started the Vacation Rental Alliance here in Minnesota. We have about 190 members, so I've been actively involved with regulations here, St. Paul, Stillwater, and quite a few other places, and have spoken regularly. Not that I enjoy doing it, but I do. My concern today is with the $5,000 annual fee for platforms, mainly because I have a small local platform. It's a cost prohibitive type of fee. I mean, I would have to make $100,000 in bookings just to be able to pay that $5,000 just to break even. And I'm advertising in Minnesota Visitor Guide, Minneapolis St. Paul Visitor Guide, to attract and bring people to the great state of Minnesota and the cities, which the larger platforms are not doing. So I'm asking for a concession. You're willing to give these large platforms like Airbnb and VRBO these concessions on data sharing and downloading and all this other stuff. I'm asking you to give the local businesses a similar type of concession as far as a licensing fee. I don't feel it's fair. I feel that you're forcing owners to only list and have properties with these large corporations. I have no problem giving you the data. I mean, I feel you should have and should know who is running and doing these things within your city limits. I don't personally understand why they don't want to do it. It seems like a cop-out, but whatever it is. So that's my main thing. I just would like to, it's the cost of doing business. I'm hoping that you can get some sort of concession in there for that. The rest of it, you guys have done a great job. Compared to all the other cities I've dealt with, you're making this process extremely easy, straightforward, and I commend you for it. I think it's great to see, and I appreciate your work on this.
So perhaps you and Scott, right, could just touch base with, because this is a new issue I had not heard about, the difference between licensing platforms that are big national companies versus smaller local folks who do it more frequently. I'm not sure if our staff had heard about that or not, but perhaps you could just hang out and talk to staff afterwards about this angle. That's what a public hearing is for.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to. I spoke at St. Paul too. They had a $7,000 fee. I remember sending one of the, Michael, I think, asked him what the fee was going to be, and he said it'd be, they couldn't legally do something, past the cost of doing business or something like that. But to see $5,000 seems.
It seems a little regressive.
Well, I don't make $30 billion a year like Airbnb does doing their stuff.
I'm agreeing with you. So I would say, okay, great. I'll wait till after and talk to staff.
Happy to do that.
Great.
Thanks.
And if you wouldn't mind, Scott, right? And maybe you could just touch base with Mr. Wilson after this. That's the point of a public hearing, to get information and try to act on it. So I'm just inviting you to act with our staff after this.
We pay taxes.
Thank you.
Hello, committee. I'm Sherry Desmond May. I live at 2626 West River Parkway, south in Minneapolis. We've been using a section of our home upstairs that was a grandmother apartment as an Airbnb rental for the last 3 years. We've had many guests. It has, we renovated the space. We have increased our property value by adding a fence and gardens and a patio in back. The people that come are incredibly rich from all over the world. I've had people from every continent, and now get mostly grandparents and parents coming to visit their kids and grandkids in the city. We're full fall, spring, summer, and during the winter, almost 3/4 full. So for us, it has been a rich experience. It means we keep up our household so that the property values are up. My husband collects trash in the neighborhood every day to make sure that our guests are welcome in the city. And I send our guests to all of our local venues, the breweries and the art fairs and the local grocery stores and restaurants. So to me, it seems like a great benefit to the city. I appreciate your conscientious examination of this and really urge you to vote on keeping the platform as you have and that proposal as it has developed.
Thank you for
very
your
much.
testimony. Thank you for being here today. Next.
Hi, my name is Angie Toomey. I'm at 2313 Cole Avenue. And I'm just going to pull up my notes here. I am with Minneapolis Vacation Rentals. I have a vacation rental management company, and I manage properties that I own as well as properties for other people in Minneapolis and in the surrounding area. First, I want to thank you, the City Council, and all of those involved in drafting the regulations that allow us to continue providing affordable, comfortable, and friendly accommodations for visitors to Minneapolis. I began offering homes for rent on VRBO in 2005, and I'm proud to say that I was the very first vacation rental in Minneapolis. I've seen a lot of things change and evolve over the last 10 plus years. In 2005, at that time, having a vacation rental meant that I could generate income during vacancies of my long-term rentals and continue paying my mortgages for my investment properties. During the downturn in the market, I can credit my vacation rentals with really helping my rental property business stay afloat. I also credit my vacation rentals for creating strong bonds with my neighbors. Good relationships are very important to me, and being able to continually improve my properties and keep my neighbors informed about my homes has strengthened my relationships in the neighborhood and the community. I also feel that it improves the value of our neighborhoods and brings a significant amount of income to our restaurants, such as Manning's Cafe down the street from me, the Waffle House near Van Cleve Park, the Butcher Block in northeast of Minneapolis, among other variety of restaurants and activities. While I'm fully supportive of licensing requirements as it relates directly to the host, I do have many questions and potentially concerns about proposed regulation for the platforms, as it seems that my management company may fall under the definition of a platform, as Scott and Lance have also voiced concerns. Some of the language in the proposed ordinance leads me to believe that I might not be able to operate at all, whether it be legally or by paying the $5,000 fee. Until I have a better understanding and comfort level, I'm requesting that we take the regulations as it impacts the platforms, or table the regulations as it impacts the platforms, so that we can all operate legally and fairly, and so that we have the same opportunities as the larger platforms do. I want to be 100% compliant, and I feel that a bit more time, conversations, and feedback are needed to ensure this occurs.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Susan Tearaway. I live at 677 13th Avenue in Northeast Minneapolis, and I happen to own a Victorian triplex. And so I don't quite know. It's a little bit unclear. We would need a little clarity on, is it owner occupied, the one unit I rent out as an Airbnb, the other is just on the general rental market. So I'm not quite, that part wasn't quite clear. The other thing is, apparently there's an occupancy requirement for Minneapolis long-term rentals would also apply to short-term rentals, which those criteria are a little bit restrictive, I would say, because one family and up to 2 other people could stay at a unit together. And frequently we have 4 young people who are unrelated coming to stay with us. So, or, you know, when 4 guys come for the Super Bowl game or some of that, I think it's going to be impossible to determine who's married and who's not. So I guess that part was unclear to me, and I'm not sure why it's in there.
Thank you for your testimony. Welcome.
Welcome. My name is Christine Barajas, and I live at 4300 Garfield Avenue South. My husband and I have been in that home for 28 years, and we raised our kids 2 blocks away, and they went to the South Minneapolis schools, and so I know the area really, really well. 10 years ago, during the whole housing crisis, I was one of those that Wells Fargo got, and I was afraid we were going to lose our home. And we fought through it, and we held on. But it was also a super scary time for us because I had 3 kids in high school, and all of them looking at college. And I didn't know how we were going to get through this. Well, I'll tell you what has made the big difference, because also our taxes, our taxes on, you know what property taxes are like in South Minneapolis. It's through the roof. This has made the difference now that I have 2 graduated from college and 1 a 5th-year senior. And so they've been out of the house, but I have this big, beautiful home that I get to share with people. There's not many other places where I'm at to be able, the Aqua City Motel down in South Minneapolis, but I send people to 46 in Bryant and 46 in Grand Patisserie 46 and all these different local places. And I am a great ambassador for the city of Minneapolis. And it affords me and my husband the ability to stay in our beautiful home around my neighbors who I cherish. And I just wanted to give you a little background about the average Airbnb person that is. I think they say that most, or a good portion of Airbnb people are single women actually trying to make renting out extra space and things like that. So just to let you know.
Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Next. Now we're going to just let everyone keep going.
Good afternoon. My name is Chuck Eddy, and we have a property at 250 Park Avenue. We have that as a second home as well, and we are concerned about how this is all getting set up for the Super Bowl, et cetera. So one of my issues or concerns is if it doesn't kick in until December 1st, can the hosting platforms be prepared, and will they be in compliance by the time rental agreements are accepted, which is beginning right now. So I'm not sure how the timing is going to work, but maybe there needs to be an exception for the Super Bowl since it's coming up quickly. Second, is I would suggest an additional category. We look at this as our urban cabin as well, and our intent is not to rent more than 14 days per year. So I would suggest that this piggybacks the federal tax law, the Augusta tax rule, which is basically states that 14 days or less, there are no taxes required on a rental of that length. I would still collect the fees. I understand getting a handle on all of these rental units out there, so the fees and the license fees, et cetera, I think would be great. But this additional category, you could collect the fees and maybe reduce the administrative costs to the city and to the state if you create another category where you say 14 days or less might not require as many hoops to be jumped through. And then just to reiterate again on the hosting platform, in our building, there may be an opportunity for us to host our own platform as well. So again, that $5,000 fee would be prohibitive, but we are close to the Super Bowl venue, and there will be additional venues coming up with NCAA tournament, et cetera. So we may want to host our own platform, but again, if it's X amount of units or less, maybe we can get around that $5,000 annual fee. I think there's 90 units in our building, of which approximately 40 are in the pool that want to rent. So maybe there's a category there for the hosting where it says if you represent less than a certain number of units, you can get around that $5,000 hosting fee.
Thank you for your testimony.
Okay.
Hi, Chris DeLaurentis. Lived in Elliott Park or Ventura Village for the last 30 years. Been pastoring Life Center Church at 1812 Park Avenue since 1993. Been owned 20 units at 614 South 9th Street, so historic brownstones. Been renting those for the last 15 years, loved it. Started doing some Airbnb about 6 months ago on a couple of units as I was holding some units for someone. And it was just so cool, loved it. And the people that were coming to the city really enjoyed to be able to stay in an old 1886 building as opposed to a beautiful hotel downtown, right? We love our hotels, but what a different experience that we provide. So many provide. And then they go to Segway Cafe or Bandbox, some local places to eat. So it's just been great. Thanks for this regulation. I think it's pretty fair. I'm glad that Airbnb will be collecting the sales tax portion. I've been paying it, one less thing for me to do. So that's a win-win for me. And I love it that you're listening to these new small business entrepreneurs who are starting their own platforms, who need to use some of that leverage of these big companies so that they can get their foot in the door too. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris. Mr. McElroy.
Madam Chair and members, my name is Dan McElroy, 1959 Sloan Place, Maplewood, and I'm here on behalf of the Minnesota Lodging Association, and thank you for the opportunity. The association's position for many years has been that we believe that home rentals are here to stay. They're part of a sharing economy that our guests and others like, but that they should compete on as level a playing field as is reasonable. We're supportive of the two ordinances before you today. We applaud the distinction between true home sharing, part-time home sharing, and commercial buildings. When we hear about a building of 80 units, that's larger than about a third of the hotels that are our members. And we think the distinction between licensed and unlicensed hotels is important. As you know, there are 38 hotels in Minneapolis with about 9,000 rooms. They employ more than 10,000 people. And many of those jobs, in fact, virtually all of them, are good paying jobs with benefits. Hotels pay property taxes at the highest category in the commercial 3A category. And they're important to our economy and our culture and our brand. And they can easily coexist with reasonably regulated, appropriate home sharing. And we think that the ordinance may need to change over time, but this is a really good place to start. I do want to clarify, however, that the federal law exempts home rentals for 14 days from the federal income tax. There is no such exemption under the sales tax. And so that sales taxes are due. They may not always have been collected, but from day one and dollar one. So with that, Madam Chair and members, we appreciate your efforts on behalf of the community.
Thank you for being here today. Whoever's next.
Good afternoon. My name is Tim Connolly. I live at 4312 Washburn, and my wife and I are investors, and we own 5 rental properties in North Minneapolis. We Airbnb 3 of them, and 2 of them are long-term rentals. I just want to point out there's so much discussion about this around the country, and a lot of it focuses on problems with these things. And I just want to bring a different point of view to it. We have had a tremendous amount of fun with this, as well as with our guests. We bought 4 foreclosures in North Minneapolis, and we rehabbed all of them. We're closing on number 5 on Friday, and we will fix that one up. And whether we short-term or long-term is yet to be determined. We are certified landlords on all the properties. We have been through Luther Kruger's course on landlording, so we're responsible. One of the places we bought was a tier 3 when we bought it. It is now tier 1. And people talk again, as I say, about problems. Our business operates on great reviews. Without great reviews, without the amazing guest experience, we have no business. Across our 3 Airbnbs, we are 4.9 out of 5 stars across the board. So we work very hard at that. There are no problems. I think a great advantage to it as well, we have eyes on 4 different neighborhoods in North Minneapolis. I am in each of our homes multiple times each week. I keep eyes on them. I have no problem calling the police if I think that's needed. And so I think we are actually a pretty good benefit. People talk about over-occupancy. Honestly, these old houses in North Minneapolis, I'm worried about my plumbing. I don't have the patience for over-occupancy. Further, I think it's great for the city. We Instagram. We promote Minneapolis. We promote the businesses here. We tell people where to get a good beer, where to get good coffee, where to have a good meal. We drive all of that here. We meet and greet a lot of our guests. We've had a Swiss band cutting a CD stay at our place. We've had an Irish folk band stay at our place. We've had a Brazilian volleyball team play, and we had to use our phones to communicate because I don't speak Portuguese. We are booked for Super Bowl as well as for the international cross-country competitions at Worth Park in January. We've got a team from Austria coming to stay with us.
You are fascinating, but your time is.
My last point that I would make is in addition to all of that, we also hire cleaning people and lawn service people to do the 5 places. So I think we are actually bringing good things to the city.
I think so too.
Thank
you
you
for being here to tell us about it. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Carol Lee. I have a duplex at Logan Park, 1126 Jefferson Street Northeast. I am a Tier 1 landlord upstairs, and I rent my guest room downstairs. I'm there. I started it originally after the 2013 winter that was so bad, and I became very isolated. So for people like me, older people or people who work at home, it's wonderful to have the company, and it's really like building family to have an Airbnb rental. I'm a super host with lots of good reviews. Few bad reviews can kill an Airbnb rental. I think there are a lot of young people who are starting out and retired people in my neighborhood. Plus, we're wonderful for the businesses of Northeast. There are no hotels or motels in Northeast Minneapolis. And I've noticed that I have an increasing number. I have a lot of people from all over the world. But all of a sudden, this past year, as Airbnb has kind of taken off, I get people from Wisconsin and South Dakota, even Illinois, coming in for a concert or coming in, for a wedding or something that they would not come to if they had to park downtown. There's plenty of parking on my block or in my neighborhood. I maintain a website I'm a big fan of the Visitors Bureau. I pass out their booklets. I have a website, carolsairbnb.com, where I advertise all sorts of things going on in the city, and a Facebook page, Visit Northeast Minneapolis, where I post news about what's going on in Northeast. The only thing we've questioned, we love what the city has done, incidentally. We've complimented the staff with some of the council members. They've met with us. We've talked with them. There have been hotel people there as well and so forth. But we have asked that maybe under Title 12, Part C, where there are exclusions, that perhaps you could make it obvious that you intended to exclude people who are renting guest rooms.
Great. Unfortunately, you are also adorable, but we have to keep going. Thank you for your testimony. Let me just get a sense of who else would like to speak. We have 9 minutes left, so I don't want to cut anyone off. Rather than maybe telling us your interesting personal story, if you could speak to the regulation, that would be good, just so we can get everybody else in. Thank you for being here.
My name is Jean Buckley. I'm at 4524 45th Avenue South, and I've contacted Kim Keller and Councilmember Andrews about my concern, because you started off the thing saying, I need to be clear here. If I own the property, not going off to my boyfriend's house, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that is what this piece of paper showed us when we met with licensing. When you read it, it is not clear. And when I contacted Kim Keller and Councilmember Andrews, they say we are purposely being silent on it based on our attorney's recommendation. And I feel strongly that or I would feel more comfortable that if a portion of an owner-occupied home where the owner is present was an exception. I just don't want it to come back to bite us, so I want it on public record that this is not what it says. And
That's why I said that out loud.
Right. So thank you for saying that out loud, and I also support that. And also, I came today because I was afraid from reports on the news that I've been hearing that there's been a lot of pushback on Airbnb, and I'm pleasantly surprised that you're not getting that today. Now, I don't know where those people are who are opposed to it, but I think you're hearing from the hosts at least today that it's a great experience for us. So
Yeah,
thank you very
for
much
being
for
here.
considering it.
I think what happens is the news says, well, all these onerous things are happening in some city, but we're not, but we're taking it up at the same time, and it scared people. I know I have my own constituent here that happened with, and I encouraged him to come today. So, but we got to hear all of the interesting stories of what the cool things people are doing. So I think it reinforces that the shared economy is alive and well in Minneapolis.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Hi, my name's Laura Burles. I live at 3845 Cedar Avenue. I have in a 900 square foot house. And I own a duplex with 2 one-bedroom apartments at 3300 Cedar. And one is fully rented long-term. The other one I'm turning into an Airbnb. And I totally believe in a level playing field. I was very concerned when I read this online last week. It seems like a lot of the language has changed, but it was really unclear to me. It's a little more clear now, but I would like more clarity about it before it would go into effect. And I would like to say I'm not a big investor. I have one property, which I'm not, maybe I'm not a very good business person. But I would say I already pay a lot. I've had a rental license for 10 years. I pay that. I've had inspections. I pay an extra $1,000 in property taxes every year because I don't live there. I pay double for garbage and water there, even though my tenants produce hardly any garbage and use hardly any water. The ESU of the is greatly inflated because it's considered a duplex. That it's they charge a lot more for the water than the water is actually used. So I would just like to say, if you add a fee of $175 just to register, that's really quite a bit for someone like me, where I would be renting a one-bedroom apartment through Airbnb. So I'd like more clarity and a look at the fees when you're already paying all these fees for a full rental license and everything that goes with it. Thanks.
Thank you for your testimony. So the last speaker.
Hi, this is Sai Bazawada, 215 10th Avenue South. I have coincidentally, we have a platform to manage rentals for the Super Bowl for a condo building. And I just want to support what a couple of the other members said was, as regards to the $5,000 for the platform, which seems a little steep, and I would encourage or request to consider either staggering it, either the number of units on the platform or a percentage of gross revenue or something to that effect, because it doesn't seem like a even playing field where an Airbnb may be paying the same amount as a small platform that has only 30 condos or whatever. I also appreciate the lodging industry saying that they would be coexisting, but it's a hotel building is completely different than a condo building that has, a platform that has condo buildings that have intermittent rentals. So I think, but I do appreciate everything, all the efforts and actions all of you have taken, because it's not easy regulating everything. So appreciate the thoughtfulness to it. Thanks.
Thank you, and thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else who would like to testify? Anyone? Anyone? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First off, I really appreciate everybody's comments. I appreciate everyone for coming out. This is a new form of business. It's an innovative model. And it's something I think we're going to have to continually embrace as the business world we're living in changes. And we can probably see it changing pretty dramatically in the near future. And so I appreciate you working with us through this process because this sharing economy and regulating it is kind of a first-time thing for all of us. And to be very clear, we are for the short-term rental model. We are for Airbnb and VRBO. We are for this new innovative business model that I think will really help people enjoy our city from a different perspective. We just need to make sure that it's safe. So we're providing that baseline regulation to ensure safety. There were several comments that I think will ultimately help influence the ultimate character of the ordinance, and in particular, the last individual made I think a really intelligent remark about, if you're a platform that only has 5 individuals on it, it's dramatically different than if you had 5,000 people on it. And perhaps the fee should be adjusted to those particulars. So I think these are subject matters that I'm going to work with staff in the interim between today's meeting and the final vote. And the final vote may not even happen this cycle, as it's possible that we need to continually refine. And so that being said, I think we're in a solid place to start from. So I'm going to move to approve. Fully acknowledging that there will likely be changes that happen as we move forward. There will not likely be things that I'm not anticipating and that we can correct for. So I'm happy to.
Okay. Councilmember Reich.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the Vice Chair Fry for the work and continued effort to refine what we have as a solid base, as you put it. I think the commentary that we had here helps us tweak what we have before us. And any clarifications, I think Chair had indicated staff is available here today and even afterwards if necessary to make sure there's clarifications on any of the language. And then if anything needs to be in the base ordinance that creates permanent clarification, we should endeavor to do that as well. But really appreciate the work done so far.
Okay, since there's no other comments, I just want to make this comment. I wasn't really a fan of regulating this at all. I see this as a way for the hotels to say, hey, they're not doing something that all of these people are doing, but I accept the fact that this is the reality, that there's going to be some regulation. But I actually do have a concern enough to direct staff as part of the approval to draft language that states if you are a homeowner that is staying in your home and renting a room while you are there, you are exempt. I think it does need to be expressed. I understand you have some legal considerations to pay attention to, but let's work through that and see how we can get to yes. I don't want to leave that hanging out there. That's one of the concerns I've heard from a number of constituents. The second one, I do not think it's right treating the Skyscape Condo Board or the 205 Condo Group as a platform or even a private business the same as VRBO, Expedia, and Airbnb. I just don't. And so I would also direct staff as part of this approval to determine at what point we have a large platform or a less than large platform and create 2 tiers with some legitimate legally defensible criteria. And that doesn't mean like 5 and up or something like that. But, if I had to say, I'd take a look at one of the larger buildings in the city and look at a number like that. And I would also encourage you to talk to the people who are here today who have some valuable input. One of the pieces of public participation that I didn't hear was talk to people who do this. So we talked to Expedia, we've talked to, and none of them I notice are here today. And if you're a lawyer for any of these big platforms, raise your hand. Well, he already wrote us a letter saying he doesn't like it at all, so I'm not sure exactly how interested I am in hearing from him. But I would point out that all the people who came here today to say this is great for the city we love and live in. That's what I heard, and that's the point of a public hearing, to have people come and express your point of view and have us adjust as a result of it. That's the belief in government that we all are here to participate in. And so I do think it would make sense if a few people stayed after and talked to our staff. I see Mr. Stockman is happy to do so and shaking his head, and we can work out these 2 issues, and then you will leave here knowing that we're not intending to pass this as is, but we're intending to pass it with the feedback that we got from the people who are here today, who quite frankly were from all over the city. I was really surprised, I'm sure Councilmember Fry was too, that it wasn't just downtown condo owners, or it wasn't just people living on the north side trying to make money, or people on the south side who are paying really high taxes and can't afford to pay them, so they have to rent out a room. It was really across the board, I thought. And so I just want to pass those two staff directions, and if Councilmember Fry agrees, he might actually do my work for me and amend this because he's heard the same thing. Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to do your work for you real quick. Item number, I'd like to amend and tack on an item letter C at the end of 244.1845, stating short-term rental registration is not required for a homestead status property if the owner lives in the dwelling unit. Only a portion of the dwelling unit is rented, and the owner occupies the dwelling unit during the rental period. I think that makes sense, and you can invite your boyfriend over.
No, it was I was going to stay with my boyfriend.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, all right. Well, yeah. You could do both. So I'm gonna move to amend in addition to moving the underlying motions.
Okay, so Councilmember Fry's amendment, we'll go with the amendment first. Are there any comments or questions on the amendment that would negate my staff direction as well? All in favor of Councilmember Fry's amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved. And then we'll move on to the main motion, which is the approval of items 5 and 6 with the staff direction to work out some sort of difference in the platform size and platform fee, as we heard from people today. All in favor of Councilmember Fry's motion to approve signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved. Seeing no further business before the committee, we are adjourned.